your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for an Oikos remix. Like a crunchy storm of sea salt praline pretzels, dark chocolate, and butter toffee, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 Oikos Remix varieties with epic mix-ins and 11 grams of complete protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See RemixYogurt.com.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the vice chair of the New York State Republican Party, as well as being the county chair of the Suffolk County Party. With us once again is our distinguished friend, esteemed colleague, Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Gentlemen, as we speak, as we're doing this show right now, the so-called Columbia protesters have now marched themselves into Trump Tower on 5th Avenue and 57th Street in Manhattan. And what are they doing? They are demanding the release of Mahmoud Khalid, the young man who engaged in domestic terrorism threats against students at Columbia University, threatened the United States, talked about the necessity of overthrowing the imperialistic regime, and he was picked up by the immigration authorities, and he was hauled off to Louisiana for processing for deportation. Now, the big issue, Jesse and Eric, and I've been talking about this on Katz and Cosby with noted attorneys and law professors. Some people have this delusion that the right to protest is the right to interfere with, infringe, intimidate, harass other people in carrying out so-called free speech rights. You have no such right to do that. That in itself is a crime under federal civil rights law. You cannot deny other people their civil rights to get an education, to go to class, put them holed up in libraries where they can't get out, get janitors and lock them up. You can't do this. Block free entrance and exit from the campus community. And this young man was a ringleader, both at Columbia and at Barnard, for doing that. He was originally here on a student visa. That student visa terms and conditions had lapsed because he's a graduate student. He's no longer a student.
He's a green card holder now.
A green card holder. Now, let me be very, very clear. And this is a position that's taken by Professor John Yoo, by Professor Alan Dershowitz, by myself, and other Andrew McCarthy, other objective legal analysts. A green card is a privilege. It is not a right. Correct. It doesn't give you the right to go over the line. And so while you're entitled to a measure of due process to see whether there are grounds for your removal and deportation, you have no right to say, well, I'm a green card holder. I get to stay and do whatever I want. And now they've gone into Trump Tower on 5th Avenue, as I said, on 57th Street, this demonstration. And now you have other things going on, other kinds of crazy demonstrations going on against Elon Musk. You're firebombing charging stations, shooting bullets into Tesla stations, threatening the life of Elon Musk. There is no constitutional right to do any of that stuff. These people should be arrested. They should be indicted. They should be prosecuted, and they should do jail time. This is the beginning of the end of the total dysfunction and destruction of a civilized society. This is how they started Nazi Germany, by mob violence and intimidation. It has to be stopped. It has to be stopped now. Eric, your thoughts?
Well, I agree with everything you say, but let's break it down to what the argument is on behalf of Mahmoud Khalil. They're making this into a First Amendment argument. This is not a First Amendment right. The Constitution makes clear, and the Supreme Court's interpretation makes clear for hundreds of years, that institutions can place on speech reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. If you want to say whatever you want to say, you can say them, but you have to say them within the rules. If Columbia University, for instance, says free speech is in the quad between 5 and 6 or whatever it is, and you can't wear masks, and you can say whatever you want and hold placards, but after 6 o'clock everybody has to leave, that's a rule that applies to everyone because it's speech neutral. It doesn't say people who can say one thing can do this and follow the rules, but people who say other things don't have to follow the rules. The rules have to apply to everyone. What's going on with Mahmoud Khalil and his gang of anti-Semitic thugs is that they are breaking all those rules, and Colombia is not enforcing the rules. It is not a First Amendment right. It is not a First Amendment right to taunt Jews. It is not a First Amendment right to threaten the person of Jews. It is not a First Amendment right to prevent Jews from going to class. Those are crimes. Those are civil rights crimes. So when the supporters of Khalil say this is a First Amendment issue, that's nonsense. So what they're attempting to do is turn the First Amendment on its head, because they're saying that their violent speech, they are saying, is protected speech. It's not protected speech. But when students, the Jewish students, or supporters of the Jewish students come out and want to speak on behalf of the Jewish students to condemn the other speech, they are criticized as, because what they are saying is so horrible, their speech is violence. So in their bizarro world, violence is free speech when it's said by the pro-Hamas anti-Semitic crowd. But when the Jewish crowd or the pro-Israel crowd speaks, their speech is violence, and therefore it can be shut down. And what's the genesis of all this? What's the root of all this? Here you go. It's the social justice, diversity, equity, inclusion garbage, which is among the reasons why we got to root this out. It is inherently racist and anti-Semitic because it breaks down the world into oppressors and oppressed. Whereas Martin Luther King said you need to be judged by the content of your character and not by the color of your skin, the social justice crowd said you are only judged by the you're only judged by the color of your skin. The content of your character is irrelevant. If you are white, you are an oppressor. If you are black or a Palestinian, you're a person of color and you're oppressed. And you are allowed to liberate yourselves, quote unquote, by any means necessary. So that these speeches, these illegal protests, these violent protests,
it's hate speech.
It's hate speech, and it's illegal, but that is okay because they are fighting back, liberating themselves by any means necessary. And Jews are considered whites. So if Jews are whites, they are oppressors. You cannot be both an oppressor and an oppressed. So Jews, because they are oppressors, are not deserving of being protected. So while their speech, quote unquote, their violence is protected in their minds, the victims, the Jews, have no right to protection because they're oppressors. That is the bizarro world in which the social justice agenda operates. But we can't give in to this. This is illegal activity. I mean, who are these people that they can block traffic, take over public square, prevent people from going about their lives, prevent people from getting an education? And what is scariest about it, in my opinion, they're going to find anti-Semites everywhere. If they want to spew this bile, in the middle of the park, God bless them, as long as they're not interfering with anybody's right. It's not a First Amendment issue. You could say whatever you want. But what's scary about this is that the administration and faculty of Columbia condones it and protects it and protects them. That is what is so crazy about this. And then you have 14 U.S. Democratic congressperson people writing a letter to the Department of Homeland Security claiming that Mahmoud Khalil is some sort of political prisoner that needs to be protected and needs to be liberated. It needs to be free. This is a First Amendment issue. It's nonsense. You have the you have the deputy chairman of the Democratic National Committee making a statement that this is another example of Trump trying to be a dictator, and that because he sees young people as a threat, he's trying to prevent young people from speaking. This is the deputy chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Mr. Hogue. I'm just curious, Mr. Hogue, did he ever ask any of the Jewish students at Columbia whether or not they thought that Trump was trying to shut down young people from speaking when they were shut down? Did he ask any of the the righteous Gentiles who supported the Jewish students when they were shut down, whether or not Trump was trying to prevent those young people from speaking? It's garbage. It's nonsense. So the Trump administration, to its credit, has cut off $400 million of grant money to Columbia. Now, that's a lot of money, but it's just spit in the ocean. Columbia gets $5 billion a year from the federal government. All $5 billion of it needs to be dried up unless and until Columbia deals with this problem. So Columbia claims after the $400 million was cut off, they issue a statement that says, "We take Columbia's legal obligations seriously and understand how serious this announcement is and are committed to combating anti-Semitism and ensuring the safety and well-being of our students, faculty, and staff." What a load of crap. Nobody believes that. They could care less about the Jewish students. For Columbia, to put it in terms they understand, all they care about is the Benjamins. They want the money. They see it drying up. And truthfully now, the Trump administration should double and triple and quadruple down and start taking away all the money from Columbia until they change their behavior. But what is saddest is if Columbia does indeed change their behavior, it won't be because they think it's wrong to intimidate Jews or to support anti-Semitism.
It's about the Benjamins.
It's about the Benjamins. And that is what's so tragic about this. But as an American Jew, I don't really care if Columbia is bankrupt and shut down. They need to pay a price for what they're doing.
I want to turn this over to Jesse, but I just want to raise this one point. This is much bigger than Columbia. This is a nationwide phenomenon.
Right, but you send a message to all
That's
of
right.
them.
So, and Jesse, I want you to talk about this. There are two messages, which is we will not appease these domestic terrorists and we will shut down their violence and denial of civil rights to their fellow people here in the United States, or we'll allow it to happen. And if you allow it to happen, it's going to spread like a cancer all across this country. Jesse, your thoughts?
Yeah, you have both, clearly demonstrated and shared that this is not a First Amendment issue. This is really a series of crimes, and the fact that Columbia and other colleges are basically, by turning a blind eye, are complicit in this violence against students. I think the message, if I could add to this, is that there's a new sheriff in town. There's a new sheriff on campus, in all of our campuses here, and it comes with a very blunt, direct positioning by our president, Donald Trump. You know, there are about 60 universities and colleges that it's my understanding are under review. 6 of 8 of our Ivy League colleges, Harvard and Columbia being included, have received letters from the federal government about these type of issues. Because you're right. This is not a First Amendment issue. And if you allow this to go on in one place, it will fester. It's the old broken window syndrome. If you're allowed to get away with something here, that means another group believes it can do it. And it goes on, and then you have riots run throughout this area. You know, Columbia has had this history of allowing this type of issue to go forward. And, you know, my place, and I stand with those students that are being really oppressed. They're being denied their ability to go to class, to enjoy and to live the college experience that they're paying for in Columbia and other universities here. You know, this is a situation that if college presidents and college administrations are not going to protect these students, Jewish students and other students, because it's a number of students that are getting wrapped up in this and such, Trump's federal government will. Our federal government will. A couple of things that came out of the 2024 general election for president is, along with the change of the direction of our government, was an end to this wokeism and an end to this anti-Semitism that was just parading through our colleges. How many times did we turn on the television, pick up our phones, and look on social media, riot after riot, violence after violence going on our college campuses, and these administrators stood silent. They stood with the protesters.
Right. They support what they're saying, and that's why they won't enforce the rules. That's what's so tragic.
That is what's tragic, exactly. And they are denying other students, all students, their ability to go to classes that they pay for, to enjoy that experience, to go to the gym, be basically held hostage by these zealots and these anti-Semites. And the president has said, this is not going to happen under my watch. And you know what's even just as disturbing? That the college presidents and administrations are basically complicit. No, not basically. They are complicit in this anti-Semitism going on that they allow on their college campuses. Is that these Democrats, including the minority leader from New York, Chuck Schumer, is basically on the side of these anti-Semites. This has got to end. And you know what? The one thing about a president that doesn't have to worry about a second term election is that they can be laser focused, especially with the mandate this president received in November, to right wrongs and to make sure that there is fairness and integrity and transparency in all facets of our lives, including these college campuses.
Well said, Jesse. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be back in but a few moments with more interesting and important conversation.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
Of course you love a pint of Ben & Jerry's, but maybe you don't love sharing your pint of Ben & Jerry's. No problem. Now you can share the love with Ben & Jerry's new Scoop-A-Palooza. 28 whole ounces of crowd-pleasing flavor in a single tub. It's an instant ice cream party. And if that means your favorite pint is left just for you, so be it. Ben & Jerry's new 28-ounce Scoop-A-Palooza. Made for sharing in 4 larger-than-life flavors. See benjerry.com/palooza.
Custom window treatments are a small upgrade that have a big impact. No better time to shop than now at Blinds.com's Memorial Day Mega Sale. Blinds.com invented a better way to shop for window treatments, completely online with upfront pricing, no showroom markups, no salespeople in your home. Choose from classic shutters to outdoor shades and more, all backed by our 100% satisfaction guarantee. Shop Blinds.com's Memorial Day Mega Sale now. Save up to 50% site-wide, plus a free measure. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Jesse, I want to get your thoughts on this developing issue that's going on in Washington now. It has to do with the funding of the United States government, budget issues. There's something called a continuing resolution, or CR, which enables the government to be fully funded. the Democrats, under the leadership of Speaker Mike Johnson, strike that, the Republicans, under the leadership, Freudian slip, have just passed a continuing resolution. They got that through. They got that through with the vote of one Democrat member of Congress.
Yeah, who sits in Maine.
Whose
district Trump carried.
Right. So, well, let's give him credit for voting the right way. So he voted the right way. Democrats gave... Right, exactly. He voted for his own re-election. So his name is Jared Golden.
Yeah, self-interest is your best ally. Is it?
That's right. So what happens? It gets through. It gets to the Senate. Now, Eric's good friend and hero, Chuck Schumer, now the minority leader of the Senate Democrats, he decides with his caucus that they're not going to support this continuing resolution, which would have kept the government fully funded through September 30th of this year. And they're coming up with a proposal that, well let's do a partial. We'll do it for a 30-day period to April 11th. Well, that's very, very nice, except the House is not in session. There's not time for the House to even consider that. And so in real life, there's really a threat, as we speak now, that by Saturday morning, there may be a shutdown, a partial shutdown, a full shutdown, who knows. The irony of that, of course, is that if there's a shutdown, the President of the United States, as the chief executive officer of the country, has control over what's essential spending and non-essential spending. And in a very real sense, once again, the Democrats go down this path of self-destruction and bad public policy and bad politics because they're giving a whip hand to the President of the United States, who they despise. So, Jesse, educate Eric and me and our listeners about what this is really happening here.
So a continuing resolution is needed whenever Congress does not pass a budget. So what H.R. 1968 does basically fully funds the government through 2025. And what it does here and why the president has been supported is because it does it at current levels, and there are also included some cuts in there, in some cuts in wasteful spending and fraud that have been identified since that point. But what's important here is that our listeners should understand that if today, when they're listening to this in the morning on Sunday, that if the government is shut down, it is a result of the Democrats and the Democrats alone. The Democrats have said repeatedly since January 20th, the Republicans control the Senate, they control the House, and they control the White House. So they should be able to solve these issues. Well, the House of Representatives, in a razor-thin margin between two parties, has done the people's business. They have passed a clean bill, which, unlike any other continuing resolution, does not contain any poison pill policy riders. It's a clean, what they call a clean continuing resolution that fully funds the government and includes the needs for our military, our defense, and also it does issues where it includes the largest pay raises for our junior officers and maintains important funding for important social programs, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and so on. Now, the Democrats in the Senate, the Senate rules call for a filibuster, which we have all supported the filibuster in the past. So we have to understand that we have to have that in place to make sure that radicals do not take over this government one way or the other. All it needs, all 53 Republicans, it appears, is on board with the continuing resolution that will take us into 2025 and allow the Congress and the president, through other means, to enact further reforms.
But they need 60 votes, Jesse, don't they?
Yeah, for cloture.
They do need 60 votes.
For cloture.
But really what they need, though, is they need 7 Democrats to join on board and not shut down the government.
So that's right. And is it correct, then, if they don't support this continuing resolution, the shutting down of the government is the fault of the Democrats in the Senate?
Absolutely. This is where they're going to double down now on the issues that have failed their party at the ballot box and certainly in the implementation of their policies. There is no more of these continuing resolutions where you allow this out-of-control spending to go on for programs that DOJ has identified. Millions of dollars for, transgender transgender programs in Europe and so on and so forth. This is a clean bill. You maintain spending at where it's at. You eliminate the wasteful spending that's been identified to this point. The Republicans have jumped on board. It is bipartisan support with one vote from Maine in the House of Representatives. Now the Democrats are in a conundrum. Do they shut down the government, or do they continuously fall down the cliff to shut down this government and be on the wrong side of yet another issue of President Trump and the Republicans in the majorities of the House and the Senate? My hope is that they come to their senses, so the good people of the United States have their services and their government going. But I don't have a lot of faith in the lack of leadership of the Democrats, and certainly in Chuck Schumer.
Well, I'll tell you something interesting, and that's a good segue to something else I want to talk to you, gentlemen, about. You know, the Democrat elected officials, you know, whether they're city council members or state legislators or members of the House of Representatives or the U.S. Senate, you know, they're rallying around. They want to be the resistance, which means stop Trump and Trump's policies at every turn, fight them at every level. But they are being aided and abetted by this by federal judges appointed by Clinton, Obama, and Biden. Let me say it again. They're being aided and abetted in this effort, this resistance effort, by federal judges appointed by Clinton, Obama, Biden. Now, why do I say that? Because there's all kinds of litigation brought by these advocates against the Trump administration. Let me name a few of them, and then we'll turn it over to Eric for his analysis, and then for Jesse for more comments. So you have federal judges who have just ordered that Trump can't fire employees of the federal branch. They have to be reinstated. It's an executive function, hiring and firing. Where does a federal judge have the power to tell the President of the United States he has to maintain thousands of people on the payroll when there's duplication of services, there's wasted money, people didn't show up at work? He has that right, I submit. You have another federal judge here in Manhattan who says he's going to block Trump from deporting this guy because he wants to make sure that the guy's First Amendment rights are being honored, when we all know there are no First Amendment rights.
Well, I don't have any problem with him having hearing.
No, you give
he's
him
entitled to due process.
He's entitled to due process hearing.
It's just that's just a procedural ruling. I'm not disturbed by that. Let's see what he does once he gets to the merits.
I agree with that. But again, he's an Obama appointee, and his brother, by the way, was Obama's director of budget. Okay?
And he's a Jewish judge, by the way.
Well, that doesn't mean a thing. As Schumer points out, being Jewish doesn't mean that you're doing the right thing by the larger issues.
Well, by definition, anything Chuck Schumer does is the wrong thing.
Okay. Now, next. There's a firm called Perkins Coie. As people may remember, that was a law firm, lobbying firm in Washington that was part and parcel of a conspiracy to frame Donald Trump with the so-called Steele dossier. And that was money from the Clinton campaign to set up this Russia hoax, this Russia collusion hoax. And Perkins Coie was part and parcel of that. So the federal government, State Department, has decided that Perkins Coie should no longer get a security clearance. Now, let me tell you something. A security clearance is not a constitutional right. It's at the discretion, in the public interest, and the national security interest of the United States, not because Perkins Coie wants to make money by hawking their skills with inside information with their security clearance. Finally, you have judges who are saying not only stop the firing, stop deportation, stop security clearances being revoked, but they're going to tell you exactly how you're supposed to spend the money, which raises a great constitutional question. What's the role of the President of the United States when Congress allocates money? If it's a total fraud, it's a waste of money. If it's duplicative, does the President really have to give up his common sense and his oath of office to protect and defend this country by spending money that shouldn't be spent? And in fact, Biden, in his waning hours as President of the United States, gave out something like $200 or $300 billion to phony NGOs, non-government organizations, to people who were unskilled, had no experience, and they were all cronies of the Democratic Party and the Democratic political infrastructure. So if Trump wants to shut those down, a court's going to tell him he doesn't have the right to do that? Eric, your turn.
So there's a lot there. Let's back up a little bit. So in terms of shutting down the government, the Schumer strategy is going to be, don't blame us, don't blame the Democrats, blame the Republicans. They control the White House, the Senate, and the House. So of course it's their fault. But it gets back to the point of the filibuster, of course, and the 60 votes to get to cloture. So while it's clearly the Democrats, they're the cause, would be the cause of the shutdown, and we won't know that until Saturday, and this show will air on Sunday. But my guess is that Schumer's going to back down and that the CR is going to get passed. But I could be wrong. But that gets to what motivates Chuck Schumer, other than aggrandizing Chuck Schumer. These Democrats, led by Schumer, if given the choice between Trump failing and the country failing on the one hand, and the country succeeding and Trump succeeding on the other hand, they would rather the country failed. Under no circumstance would they want Donald Trump to succeed at anything, no matter how much the country would benefit. So I think that's really what's going on the budget issue and what's motivating Chuck Schumer. On the judiciary issue, I think we're getting back to, we've discussed this before on the show, the Democratic view, the Democrats' view of what the judiciary should be and the Republican view of what the judiciary should be. The Democrat view of the judiciary is that it should be a legislature of last resort. That if we can't win at the polls, if we can't get the American people to agree with us, we're going to make sure that we get judges or we bring cases to judges that agree with us, and they will actually act as a super legislature. That they will ignore what the law is because they don't like it. The Republican view of what the judiciary should be is that the law is the law, whether I like it or not is irrelevant, is what does the law say, and I'm just going to call balls and strikes. So what we're seeing with some of the examples that you guys were talking about is the overextension of the judiciary, overreaching of the judiciary into the legislative branch and trying to make laws or rewrite laws that they don't like. You know, Richard, one of the examples you were talking about in terms of spending money, I think it depends on what the court can rule on. As there's a difference between a law that is passed by Congress and signed by the president that says certain money should be spent. That's one example. Then you have another example, the one you gave about Joe Biden in his waning days in office, where he signed an executive order saying money should go to a certain place or be spent in a certain way. When Congress passes a bill and the White House signs it and turns it into law, I think it's reasonable for judges to say it's a law, you're required to do it, follow the law. But if the executive branch, if the president just issues an executive order, I think it's completely out of place for a judge to say that a subsequent president is required to follow the executive order of a prior president. Because an executive order lasts only as long as the executive wants to keep the order in place. So if Trump wants to reverse that order and not spend the money the way Joe Biden wanted to spend it pursuant to the executive order, the judge, I don't believe, has any right to force Trump to spend it. So I think that dichotomy is important for our listeners to keep in mind. But your example about the Biden executive order spending money as he was running out the door is a perfect one.
Jesse, we only have 1 minute left, and I want you to begin the next segment of our show by talking about this. It just seems to me that you have to take a real hard look at who the people are, the judges who are making this decision. The one that really, I find all these decisions wholly annoying and an abrogation of their obligations to call balls and strikes correctly. And having been a state Supreme Court justice, I always try to do that. My politics or political or public policy views never got in the way of trying to do the right thing in terms of interpreting the law. I didn't go in with an agenda. And I don't think, and U.S. District Court judges and state Supreme Court justices are both the same thing. We're both trial court judges, and we should be enforcing the law as it's written. And I believe in that. But what really draws my hackles a lot is a judge who just said that you're denying Perkins Cole's right to make a living, and therefore Trump has no right to rescind their security clearance. That's the same one who rescinded, her name is Howell, she's the same one who rescinded constitutional protections with respect to attorney-client privilege, statutory protections with respect to attorney-client privilege, and jammed it down Trump supporters and officials' throat, and totally abrogated the important right of attorney-client privilege, said it wasn't there, and said, strangely enough, that it wasn't for Trump to assert attorney-client privilege on behalf of his aides and his officials, but Biden could waive it for Trump. Well, that makes it totally meaningless, because then you have a partisan like Biden, who's a rubber stamp for the crazy left wing, just totally abrogating any protections that Trump had with respect to attorney-client privilege or the officials working for him. That's a dangerous precedent, and that judge just did it again. You shouldn't say that the President of the United States can't revoke a security clearance? Really? This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Judge Richard Weinberg is me, and esteemed colleague, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist, Eric Levine. We'll be right back for our final segment of this week's Let the Record Show.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Smart Water Alkaline with antioxidant. 9.5 plus pH, now in cans.
Refreshing.
Made for every way you move.
Should I run a marathon?
Let's start with finishing that water. Smart Water Alkaline with antioxidant, now in a sleek can. For those with a taste for taste. Grab yours today.
This episode is brought to you by GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco. Get the most out of your vehicle with GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco original equipment. The only parts designed, engineered, tested, and backed by General Motors. You can find your perfect fit for most makes and models and choose from 3 tiers of parts, including GM OE or gold and silver aftermarket parts. Visit gmparts.com for more information.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We are back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Suffolk County Republican Chair, as well as the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party. Noted commentator, essayist, and attorney Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Jesse, before we move on to other topics, I want to get your thoughts as being a great political and public policy leader here in New York State and indeed across the country about this overreaching, as I see it, of these federal judges in an attempt to be part of the resistance against the Trump administration. What are your thoughts?
Well, number one, we'll set aside great, because I don't think that's the case, but I will take the point about these judges. Unfortunately, in a political environment, you're going to have situations like this. And I think that we've all articulated, you two have articulated in the first segment, that there is a philosophy. Republicans want judges to rule on the law, balls and strikes fairly with integrity. Democrats, and we've seen them time and time again, have been nominating, and when they've been in position to do so, judges that are more activists. As I think Eric called it, a super legislature, or maybe you referred to it as a super lawmaking body, which is wrong and against our Constitution. I'm skeptical when it comes to judiciary. Except for me.
Except for you. No,
right. You've demonstrated, and there's a lot of good judges out there. There are a lot of Republican good judges out there, good conservative judges out there, and there's some good Democrat judges that are out there too. But when we see at this level, especially at the federal level, you see more of these activist judges in creating the super legislature, oversight of both parties, of both chambers, the Congress and, of course, the executive, both branches, I should say. But what at least I am comforted by is that you see the Trump administration taking a different tack than they did 4 years in the previous term. You know, they would hem and haw and do nothing almost, maybe they scream to the rooftops, but do nothing. What they're doing is like, okay, we understand we have this activist judge decision here. We're simply going to double down and we're going to appeal it. And we're going to appeal to the point and use the system as it was created to ferret out the right piece of justice, the right decision. If it's in our favor, fantastic. If it's not in our favor, we live by it through the appeal process. You know, some people have called it a conservative Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court. Yet some of those decisions have rankled some conservatives. But when they rankle conservatives and Republicans, you don't hear us saying it's time to pack the court. It's time to demonstrate in front of the judiciary, the justices' homes, and bring harm to them. We don't try and change and throw out the system because we don't agree with their decision. You know what we do? We just legislate better. We learn from that mistake and we do it better. So that's where I think that we are right now. These decisions are going against Trump and the administration. We know they're stupid. We know they're wrong. I mean, Eric articulated the one on the executive order. I'm confident that as the progresses through the appeal process, that decision will be righted and it will fall in the powers of the executive. But for right now, at least we're following the process, we're trusting the process, and we move forward through the process.
Fair enough. Thank you. Eric.
Yes, I just wanted to pick up on one point that Jesse made, which I think is very important. So many people accuse Donald Trump of being lawless. You know, the law, everyone's above the law, everyone has to apply the law. But what's interesting is, irrespective of how a court rules, for every ruling, Donald Trump has followed every one. If there's been an injunction, his administration has followed it, even if he disagrees with it. He has abided by whatever ruling the court gives, and if need be, he'll appeal it.
You want to contrast
and then
that
in contrast,
to Biden?
Exactly, and in contrast to Joe Biden, there are two perfect examples. With the student loan program, the Supreme Court said your forgiveness of the loan program is unconstitutional and illegal. Congress did not give you that power. You don't have it. And Biden said, I'm going to ignore you, and I'm going to give another student loan forgiveness, in complete violation of the Supreme Court's ruling. That's one example. The second example was the court ruled that the moratorium on paying mortgages and rents is unconstitutional. The government did not have that power. And in this case, it's even more glaring what Joe Biden did. Joe Biden actually said, I know the Supreme Court said it's unconstitutional, but I'm going to extend it anyway, because by extending it, I'm going to give all these people these extra rights, and it'll take time for people to go back to the court, and it'll extend something that I know is unconstitutional. So the next time some Democrat tells you that Donald Trump is lawless, thinks he's above the law, and doesn't follow the courts, and has no respect for the courts, give him the back of your hand, and you can give him those two examples about Joe Biden. Because Donald Trump, you can say whatever you want about him, you cannot point to a single example, and if you can, let me know what it is, because I'm unaware of it, where a court has ruled and he has defied the court.
Well said. So I want to raise this issue. I'll frame the issue, and then I'll turn it to Jesse, and then we'll hear what Eric has to say about it. Tariffs.
Oi.
Okay. Eric has already been spoken. He's used his time up. He said, oi. There's nothing more to be said.
Okay, so, Counsel, Your Honor.
That's my argument.
Oi. His time.
That's right. He's wasted his time. Yeah. All right. Listen, let me tell you what I think about tariffs. Tariffs is a gimmick. To Trump, it's a beautiful word. Maybe the most beautiful word in the English language, he said. All right. If you use tariff as a tactic to try to move your adversary to a certain position, to compromise, to go in your direction, and they fold quickly, and so the threat is sufficient to do it, I get that. It's a tactic. It's a strategy. It's an approach. It's not a substitute for good economic policy. My problem with tariffs is I don't think they work. I don't think they've worked historically. I think you get involved in trade wars. I think trade wars are bad for everybody. People are losing fortunes in their retirement plans, their 401ks, their 457k plans. Stock market investments, we're in our second week of going down. We entering bear territory. People muttering the ugly word of recession. It's not necessary. So that's one thought I have about it. I'm not a fan of that, and I wish Trump would give it up, and I wish Trump, frankly, would concentrate on getting the tax bill through, which is absolutely essential, because if you don't have the 2017 tax bill reinstated, you're going to have the biggest tax increase in history. It's going to be awful for everybody. So I think Trump should get away from that. Second point I want to make, and then I'll turn it over to Jesse. Why are you doing this against Canada? You want to do this against Mexico as leverage to have them seal the border and go after the fentanyl cartels, and the drug trafficking and human trafficking types. Okay, God bless you. You use it. But Canada is one of our greatest allies. Their people fight and die in wars right next to us. They supply us with enormous energy to a number of our states, including upstate New York, and I think Minnesota and Michigan. They supply us with jobs. They're good people who share our common shared values of Western civilization. Stop the nonsense with tariffs and stop talking about Canada being the 51st state. Let's get back to important stuff. Jesse, your view.
Well, first of all, I think that we have to acknowledge that Canada, the northern border, is also a source. And Newsday has done a story on this here in New York and about the inflow of illegal migration and also fentanyl. And if you remember when the first tariffs were announced for Canada and Mexico, one of the reasons was to secure that border, that northern border. In fact, they were suspended and rescinded or delayed by the Trump administration because there was action taken by Canada to secure the border and add
your point's
more
well
resources.
taken.
Not on the fentanyl.
So that's number one.
Not on the fentanyl.
That's
there's less than 1%.
Number two, it's still the drug issues that have come through there. Whether we can say or not with any that it's not fentanyl, I think that's wrong. But another thing, let's go on the economics of this. If you look, it's funny because I just saw a graphic of the first term for Donald Trump and what's transpiring now in the stock market. But I think we can all agree that America was having one of the most robust economies that they had in history leading into right before COVID. And part of that, early on in his administration, Donald Trump utilized tariffs and the threat of tariffs as part of his economic package, not so much to raise revenue, but again, more as a diplomatic tool. And it was successful to the point where even Joe Biden, who railed against tariffs and railed against Donald Trump, maintained a number of the Trump tariffs in place. I believe, and I see that the Trump administration is using tariffs more as a diplomatic tool, as a hammer to get differing parties to the table. And I don't think that you can argue the point of reciprocal tariffs. If the EU or a different country is charging us a $200 tariff, and I'm just using round numbers, a $200 tariff, and we're charging a $25 tariff, what would be wrong about equalizing that by making them reciprocal? I believe that it's been working in terms of diplomacy. We've seen how it's been working with different countries. The influx of about $2 trillion of planned development and manufacturing back into this country by a host of companies moving forward. It's going to be bumpy. The other thing is that Donald Trump, or this new Donald Trump, maybe a more mature Donald Trump than the first term, is being honest with the American people. He sat down with Fox Business News and said he understands that there's going to be a little bit of a disruption. There's going to be a bunch of hiccups and a little bit of concern at the beginning of this process. But that in the long term, it's going to right an economy that needs to stand on its own, as opposed to, basically outsourcing all of its manufacturing, its antibiotics, its AI systems and such. This is more of a diplomatic tool than an economic tool, and I believe and I see that they're being successful in getting the parties to the table to get fairness for the American economy.
Yeah, so just one correction on the fentanyl. I believe it's a fact that less than 1% of the fentanyl that finds its way into our country comes from Canada. So I'm not sure that you're...
But people in New Hampshire about that situation.
Yeah, I'm not saying that people in New Hampshire don't die from fentanyl, but it comes from Mexico.
But let's be clear. Fentanyl is a human disaster in the making.
Right, then that's at the feet of China.
Okay, I agree with that. But what I'm saying to you is, so if it's 1%, 1% is too much. It's absolutely too much. I agree with Jesse on that.
Well, I don't know that it warrants the tariffs. But, Jesse, you make the point that the Biden administration kept tariffs in place. But those were tariffs on China. And there's a completely different calculus when you place tariffs on an enemy than on allies. I'm not sure why we're fighting with our allies, Canada being a prime example. What it does is it's inflationary. It's a regressive tax on people who are poor because it drives up the price of goods. It invites a trade war. What Donald Trump is succeeding in doing right now in Canada politically is the Liberal Party in Canada was something like 85 points behind the Conservatives when Trudeau left. Now all of a sudden they're pulling within single digits of the Conservative Party because there's such resentment to America and Donald Trump and these tariffs. It would be far more helpful to the United States if the Conservative Party in Canada won than if the Liberal Party in Canada won, which is not as pro-American, which is not as robust militarily as the Conservatives. So I think it's backfiring on us, and it brings instability to the markets. The Dow Jones is down probably like over 2,000 points in the last week. The S&P is down over 100. Markets don't know what to do. People don't know how to set prices. People don't know how to plan. Because of the instability that the tariffs are bringing. And on Trump's policy or theory or thought that Canada would be a 51st state, well, I'm not sure the Canadians are too keen on it, but how would they come in? Would it come in as one big state that would get 2 senators? Well, that's 2 Democratic senators. That just makes it much more difficult for Republicans to maintain the Senate. And if they come in as 5 or 6 states, Quebec, Ottawa, the other provinces, then all of a sudden you have 8, 10 new senators that will all be Democrats. The Republicans won't be able to control the Senate. So I'm not sure what a great idea making Canada the 51st state is. Look, tariffs may be appealing in theory or as a diplomatic tool, but they have economic and political consequences. And so far the economic and political consequences are not good. The Chinese are sitting back and the Russians are sitting back and they're laughing at us because we're fighting with our closest allies. We're fighting with Canada. We're fighting with Europe. Look, there's no doubt that the Europeans and the Canadians should be lowering their barriers and they should be lowering their tariffs on us. But there are other ways to achieve that goal without the bludgeoning of our allies with these 25% tariffs that do more harm to the American people than they achieve diplomatically, in my opinion.
So let's switch gears. Let's talk international. You have, to me, 3 big issues going on as we speak. You have the Russian war against the Ukraine. You have Israel versus Hamas and that continuing saga in the Middle East. And then you have what I consider the biggest problem, the biggest threat of all, Iran's drive for nuclear weapons, which will totally change the whole world if they're allowed to get it. And I want to start with that one on Iran. The clock is ticking. And once they get this ability to do that, the world will change. And change will not be for the better. It will encourage, at the very least, an arms race for all the other Middle Eastern countries to try to get nuclear weapons. And that's going to be a real problem because these governments are not stable, and you never know when some revolutionary is not going to take it over and then have the nuclear arsenal. It's one of the biggest threats we have with Pakistan. Their nuclear power, and you never know where they stand in real life. So, Jesse, we have a couple of minutes left. I want to get your thoughts on this Iranian drive to nuclear weapons and what Trump should be doing now. I don't want to see more negotiations because they run out the clock and they keep moving steadily to achieve their goal. Enough talk. Let's have some action. That's my opinion. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that if there's action, and number one, he has already given Israel the green light that if they have to take action, they will. And he's also stated that that the United States will be working shoulder to shoulder. I don't see any reason why, if there's a letter going to the Supreme Leader, and at the same time there is a military operation to stop this nuclear program that really threatens all of Western society, that it moves forward. This, I believe, is a complete reversal or 180-degree act or approach than the Biden administration, which was one of appeasement, always taking a step backwards or issuing red lines under, like Obama, that kept being moved. Here, it's very clear. You either end your nuclear power program, or we are going to end it for you. And just recently, Donald Trump and the Trump administration issued sanctions against the Iranian oil minister because they're going after the shadow fleet of Iran selling oil on the open market against sanctions, while the Biden administration laid sanction upon sanction upon sanction against Iran and Russia and other countries. They never enforced them. This is a reversal in that public policy and diplomatic strategy as well.
Well, we have to conclude on that thought. My hope is that pretty soon, within the next time the three of us get together to talk about this, we see some meaningful action to push this back. I don't want to wake up and see that these guys have not only the capacity for nuclear weapons, but they've worked out a delivery system with their allies and friends, China and Russia and North Korea.
And North Korea, yeah.
This is very dangerous stuff. If you're going to make the move, you make it now. Israel's done the hard work of making them vulnerable. It's now time to act. This has been Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Thank you for being with us again this week. God bless you, your families, and God bless America. We look forward to being with you again next week on Let the Record Show. Thank you.